Okay, welcome again. This is Tuesday, February 17th. This is a continuation of the meeting of Senate institutions. And we have Commissioner Adam Gresham with us, Department of Finance and Management, to discuss IT funding. And we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves, and then we'll introduce the folks who are in the room. Wendy Harrison, Wyndham District.
And Rob Plunkett, Bennington District.
Joe Major, Windsor District.
Russ Ingles, Essex District. How are you, sir?
Thank you. John Benson, Orange District.
Okay.
Lisa Goffin, JFO IT consultant. Denise Ramsey, Secretary of ES, all support.
Emma Regan with Crossing Group.
Case Locum, CFO of ES.
Dr. Chief Stacking.
And
Guy Herman, Bennington, Los Angeles.
thank you, and thank you for being here. So, Commissioner, if you would introduce yourself.
Well, indeed, Adam Gresham, Commissioner of Finance and Management.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for asking me here. If it's okay with you, I thought I might share a presentation that was also shared with the House Energy and Technology.
Yes, and if you could just provide some background,
Sure.
that would be great.
So this year we made some changes within the governor's recommended budget to how we budget for the Agency of Digital Services. And as you see on this, there were really two reasons why we did this. And the first reason is that the Secretary of Digital Services, to my left, spoke to me over a while ago, and mentioned at that point she was reasonably new as secretary, and she said, you know, how we carry out our mission doesn't really match how we budget for our mission. And so could we think of another way to budget for the Agency of Digital Services that would more reflect how we deliver these services, and I think as importantly, what services and products we deliver. So that is, you'll see a fair amount of that in the following couple of slides. So that was really the first. And the second reason was that the Internal Service Fund, what's called the CIT Fund, Communications and Information Technology Fund, which has a fair amount, in fact, the vast majority of the spending authority that is used by the Agency of Digital Services, that had deteriorated in its balance over the past 3 years. From the end of 22, when it had a small surplus, just under $1 million, to the end of 25, when it had about a $25 million deficit. And so, you know, we really had the two factors: one, to change how we budget for ADS to more reflect how they go about doing their business, and two, to acknowledge and try to reduce the likelihood of further deterioration in internal service funding. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, and I apologize for interrupting, but I just want to make sure, because we've been to the other committee, the House committee has seen more of this, so I just wanted to reference for this committee. I believe the last time that this committee was dealing with this issue, that was the joint meeting that we had with the House. So lots has happened since that joint meeting. And so the commissioner is here to explain how the payments are processed and managed, which that was the hanging information that we didn't know at the end of that meeting. I hope that's helpful. Thank you. Proceed.
You're welcome. So to, you know, provide further context, you know, this in a, you know, I think simplistic but accurate diagram is how prior to this year, in fiscal 26 or 25 or 24, and prior, is kind of how the agency was budgeted. And there are four main cost recovery methods. So back up a minute. As an internal service fund, internally serviced department or agency, unlike many other departments, they do not get a direct general fund appropriation. And the reason for that is, well, I guess pretty simple, in that there are many agencies or departments that are meant to serve Vermonters, provide services, human services and public safety and economic development alike. They're serving Vermonters, providing services to Vermonters. There are other departments and agencies that are providing services to those departments that are providing services to Vermonters. They call it, I would say, just the cost of doing business. You know, they provide the building in which we're sitting. They heat the building in which we're sitting. In terms of technology, they provide the software that we use and they make sure that the software works. And if we have problems, they help fix it. They make sure it's secure, the network that we use, and the like. So these are internal to state government. They're, again, the cost of doing business. They're necessary for us to function as a state government. Those agencies and departments that are providing internal services, cost of doing business services, they're billed out in internal service funds. They don't receive direct general fund appropriation. And so they are, the concept is they bill their services to other agencies and they recover their costs that way. So they start out with a certain amount of spending authority, and at the end of the year, that spending authority has been used, and the cost of that, those services have been returned in various methods that you see here. So at the end of the year, they should end up basically at or near zero. They've done X amount of services and provided X amount of equipment or product, and they receive payment from that through the internal service funds. So that's the way it works. You know, think BGS, fee for space, same thing. DHR, they provide service, you know, human resources services, they fill out and they receive back in. So the cost recovery methods for the agency and digital services were four major cost recovery methods. The first one you see there is what's known as allocation. And those are services that are, we call it allocation because those costs are allocated basically based on a user account to every agency and department in state government. And that is a line item in their budgets, just like fee for space is, or DHR would be. So those are allocated, you know, more or less on a per user account basis. So call it a pro rata basis. Not exactly that way, but pretty close. That's about, in fiscal 26, that was about $13 million. The other three you see on here are what might be called based on demand. And that is, they are sent, you know, the spending authority is given to ADS to provide certain amount of services. Call it for SLA. When you look at SLA, think kind of digits, software, storage, computers, stuff that some agency use more than others. You know, one example for DPS, they have, you know, body cams and video that has to be stored somewhere. So they're going to be a relatively heavy user of storage, digital storage. So they should pay for that. That's part of being DPS, right? In my department, if you asked me what we budgeted for BGS in 2006, I'm going to find that through our vision system that is stored out there in the cloud. So that's something that I pay for. So hosting for various products that we have that are accessed by other people, that's a cost. But those are very specific to agencies and departments. So those are billed based on demand. And they're billed, you know, through the SLA service level agreement, which is kind of an old term. but that's, when you think about that, that's like software, services, hosting is a part of that, believe it or not. Mainframes, there's still a few things around state government. So that's built out by ADS based on need, and the departments and agencies that are using those things, they pay back. When you think of timesheet, think of humans, people. Back in the day, many of these people were actually embedded in or part of the payroll of the hosting departments and agencies. They now are ADS payroll, but they're still embedded in the various agencies and departments, and they're predominantly carrying out the IT needs of those agencies and departments. So those two are billed out monthly, based on, predominantly the cost of payroll. But those are people, think of humans. And finally, bespoke. And when you think of bespoke, think of IT projects. Some are large, some are small. In human services, the Medicaid data warehouse, that's one of the bespoke projects. But these are projects that are launched by agencies and departments, and they fill out what we call an IT ABC about what their needs are. They work with the agency digital services over their needs and what they can afford and various and sundry things. And then the agency of digital services will go out and talk to different vendors, find the right vendor through the RFP process and hire a vendor and the like, and it starts to work. And those costs, when ADS when it gets to the point where there's a deliverable, ADS will pay that bill. And then they'll bill back the agency or department that is the sponsoring agency or department. That's called bespoke. So those are 4 cost recovery methods that in prior terms, that's how it worked.
Are you okay with questions?
I'm fine.
Okay.
And this may be premature in where you're getting to, but I thought actually in the joint session we had, the rest of your staff explained where you were headed, and made a lot of sense to get your systems in line with actually how you provide services. But what I remember the big question was, so now we have this kind of new method of how we are administering our services and tracking our costs. But we have a reconciliation bill in front of us that is based on the old way that pricing and costs were accounted for. And how do we map the two together to know how now, as you're administrating things, fit into that pie? And I suspect you've had some further conversations with the House, because that's where it'll come from first and maybe back to us. But that was kind of what I recall as kind of one of the primary questions is, how do we know when we're dealing with reconciliation, this fits with this piece over here, because this piece is not how we're doing it anymore? I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's what I recall as one of the big questions that was kind of out there in that forum.
Right. I was not at that meeting, so maybe I don't have the context for that, but I may, speak to that later. But I think what you're getting at is that the IT projects, the payment for those projects is changing in fiscal 27 versus fiscal 26. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's the whole system that is changing. And so you had an old system that tracked costs in these XYZ categories. You have a new system that tracks cost in a different group. And so when you have X number of dollars and they're allocated here, how do those dollars, as you look at reconciliation, fit into the new puzzle that everything's accounted for, and that because some costs get shifted to agencies, some stay, as I understand it, in under your umbrella, and that we're not double counting things, and that all of those pieces all fit together. If you would make the change on the start, everything would track, but we're changing things in the middle of
Yeah.
So it's a core enterprise
Let me
services.
take a stab at
That what
that.
he's getting at?
Yeah.
Let me, so,
I'm not explaining.
No, I'm really glad that you asked this question because that's what. So this committee had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, I think, our joint meeting. And so lots of things have happened since then, but my take on the joint meeting was that we were being educated on the new categories in ADS. And then, so the new categories are not exactly what you're talking about
That's correct.
here. So we have the new categories and the funding structures that are both changing at the same time.
Right.
And so I think that's the challenge. And we were concerned about would the right people know what they needed to know at the right times? And so, what you're gonna hear later on, if, at least Gavin doesn't mind talking about it for a little bit, is we have a memo saying that the project management,
As I said, I'm going to
Well,
jump ahead.
well, sometimes it's good to know the end and then hear the details in between. But the project management system was what we were concerned with. And the project management system is going to be accurate, according to Lisa. So do you want?
For the record,
Okay.
Lisa Gavin, IT consultant with JFO. I just want to suggest that the committee consider inviting James Duffy in to talk
Okay.
from the JFO perspective, and
Okay.
a third party perspective. And he did a really great job at that head of House Energy and Technology, Digital Infrastructure, talking about the differences and how they map together over time. And just another third party, expert as from a finance perspective, assessment of the changes and how they map to each other. So that,
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. And just so you know, I am relieved with all of the information that I've received so far. So
Yeah.
we are sharing that now and
Okay.
we will continue.
Just what I remember the question.
Yes, yeah.
Madam Chair, can I just clarify though? So the changes you're talking about for what, for
from 26 to 27.
in the core enterprise services?
The categories
all of it.
of it,
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
and how they all match.
Fine.
And then the
You
impact.
did a really nice job explaining it in a way that takes takes a lot of the confusion out of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a challenging thing to explain. So
It is. And I think what you'll see is we went from 1 appropriation and 4 funds to 2 appropriations and 8 funds. So as far as the ability to drill down at the top level, it creates greater transparency and predictability in this shifting model that we're going to. But we put a lot of our attention and focus on core enterprise services, which is 1 appropriation. And I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, go
I
ahead.
love hearing you talk
No, no,
about
go
it. But what we didn't do is we didn't make any dramatic change in the demand. So the demand still operates in a transactional model. We're going to come back next year and say, this is all that we learned and worked on with finance and management. And you'll see us come back next year with proposed changes in the demand space. But right now, the critical focus for us is core enterprise services and establishing those foundational costs of enterprise technology for state government.
Okay, so back to you.
That. That's great, that said it all. What I would add to that is there was, I think in previous times, a lot of focus on one component that, at least from where I sit in the budget office, was not the most significant component. You know, what you just heard is the most significant component. In that there's a whole revamping of how we deliver the Agency of Digital Services and Products. That's major. But there was a lot of focus on kind of project payment and IT projects that, not to say it's unimportant, but that's really not the major show here. The major show is that we're revamping how one major agency that state government is budgeting and delivering services. And that's really I think the key takeaway that I was trying to convey. And so,
which I think we all support the
Yes,
transitions back to the old and the new is the issue.
so again, this is a simple schematic, but it kind of captures some of the change. Before there was a very large pool of essentially 4 cost recovery methods, the allocation and then the 3 demand methods, SLA, timesheet, and bespoke. That pool is quite a bit smaller now, which makes it easier to see and to track. And it just makes it, from a conceptual standpoint and a transparency standpoint, far more easy to track, to see where there may be strains, to see where cost recovery may not be what we expect it to be, and the like. So that's kind of a standard concept. If you have a large pool and you've got some deterioration in finances, let's try to break it down into component parts, which is really essentially very simply what we did.
so another pause, thank you. So it was 133 million in that pool? Or
Last
113?
year.
Last year, there was 133 million.
And that was more than ADS? That was also VGS? There were
No,
more
no, that was just ADS.
Okay,
So
so I thought it
That
was,
was just ADS,
okay, so 133 million,
right?
okay.
That was the spending authority for the so-called allocation for SLA, for timesheet, and for bespoke.
Okay, thank you.
So that spending authority this year, the actual spending authority for all of ADS is reduced to 93.4 million. I forget exactly what I should have that. 96. So that has been reduced substantially. And one major reason is, if you look at the bottom line, the bottom fund here, it says customized services fund. That is a fancier term for what was bespoke. And bespoke, those are the IT projects and services. Last year, that was $47 million. This year it's 5. And so that change represents the fact that the spending authority for the IT projects will remain with the agencies, departments that are sponsoring them. Now, keep in mind, they've always had that spending authority. It's just that so has ADS. There's been what we call duplicate spending authority there, because ADS is going out and purchasing the software or the service, and then they are billing back to the agency or department. So both ADS and the sponsoring agency department need spending authority to allow that to happen. What we're saying here is, again, this is in the context of trying to simplify and reduce a large pool into a smaller pool. We're leaving that spending authority with the agencies and departments, and they will pay the vendors at the end of the day. And we are removing it from ADS. So that's why you see a substantially smaller total pool. That's one change. It's not the only change.
Understand, that's exactly what I was kind of talking about, us being able to see. So you went from 45 million to 5. So there's 40 million, and somewhere that 40 million shows up in other places that we can be able to see that money is still there, but it's actually allocated in other places in the budget adjustment. That was kind of what trying to understand, or say that we were trying to make sure we knew how that still happens.
So
Follow that.
the money has always been there in agency and department budgets. So you can go through, say, DEVA budget, and you can see Medicaid data warehouse and a line item for that. It may not be the whole project, but you'll be able to see what they intend to spend on that, because that would be the spending authority. Now, because it's DEVA and DEVA is complicated, you got to look under federal funds and then general fund but the agencies and departments always had that in their budgets, and they still will. Similarly, the tracking of those projects, as I think you see in that memo that was written, has been done by the EPMO office, the project management office. That won't change either.
So regarding spending authority being in two places, is that typical?
For internal service funds, yes. And again, to use the example of BGS, BGS has spending authority to, plow the walks and heat the buildings. They need that because they're paying vendors, but
Right.
my department also has spending authority because I got to pay BGS. So there's duplicate spending authority for most internal service.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure.
So that's one major change. And there are two others that I would emphasize. The other major change is that, and this actually the secretary can be more articulate than I am, is that the core enterprise services creation is essentially a recognition that there are some services that are delivered at every department uses the same, a good example would be the Microsoft software on this machine. Every state employee uses some suite of Microsoft software for email, for, accessing various stuff we use on a laptop. So it seemed right to provide that as part of our core product that we provide to anyone who is in state government, along with, I have a right to know that the network I'm accessing is safe, that when I'm storing data, that is safe. So we provide all kinds of cybersecurity services. Everyone in state government gets that. So those are two examples. There are many more, but the concept was, what is it that we're providing to everyone that is kind of part of being a state employee? And that should be part of the core enterprise services. And that's why you'll see that the core enterprise services will be a total of $45 million. But one of the things that happens is some of the products that were provided through the SLA, which is based on demand, will now be part of the core enterprise services. So the amount of money that we're going to be asking and allocating or billing each department regularly for, that formerly was called allocation, will now be called core enterprise services. And it will include some stuff that we before billed out separately to departments and agencies. So what we're doing is we're consolidating what are shared services. Is a good way to put it. So, and I think that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, many of our billing practices were legacy. By that, I mean, from going back for years. And one of the things that the secretary pointed out was that, that's kind of silly. We should be billing everyone the same way. It's kind of equity in billing. So we've recognized certain products are provided to everyone, regardless of where you are. So those will be billed out as part of the core.
And the question,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will that in essence save some money as well since you're consolidating?
It should.
Okay.
Yes, it should save it. This was not done first and foremost as a cost saving.
Yeah.
But yes, it should over time.
question, unless you haven't answered that, are you?
Yeah, I'm done.
Are you distinguishing between, what I would call capital expenses versus operating expenses
So
in these categories? It sounded as if.
capital expenses should not be in.
Well, they are project expenses then. I mean,
Yeah.
the $30 million to get to a project to design and implement a system versus the however much you pay annually until you have to do the next project. Right?
Yes, that is distinguished. The cost of implementing a product presumably and buying a product and so on will be part of the SWO.
Okay,
The cost of annual maintenance
yes,
service should be part of an SLA bill.
okay, good, I think that's helpful. Okay, thank you.
So the final comment I'd make is the one kind of appearance on this second slide, that was not on the first slide is a general fund allocation. In that, remember I said earlier that internal service funds do not get direct general fund appropriations. Again, to use the example of BGS, receives, actually, they do receive a small amount of appropriation for their purchasing office and their engineering office, but the vast majority of their spending authority is through recovering from other departments. They're recovering that from other departments that have the same spending authority. ADS this year for the first time will receive direct general fund appropriation for certain functions that we and they believe should be directly appropriated because they were not being recovered through cost recovery mechanisms. And these were products that didn't lend themselves to a cost recovery method because it wasn't certain that all of the funders for our various agencies and departments would be able to fund it or would be willing to fund it. And the example I always use is within the Agency of Human Services, as you're aware, they have a fairly beefy federal component. And the federal government has various strings attached to money that they provide. And there are certain services provided to, the state government that may or may not be funded by the federal government. Think of artificial intelligence or some of the services involved with data governance. For our Medicaid program, it's questionable whether the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services would be willing to provide as part of our cost of doing business, those services. So what the Agency of Human Services would instead do is instead of billing the federal government, they would just pay general fund for it because they don't want to be audited and, end up with a finding that, no, it's part of our Medicaid program, nothing to do with data governance. This is about healthcare. What do you need artificial intelligence for in your Medicaid program? This is about healthcare. So we didn't want to go through that routine and frankly take the risk of it. So we are, for certain functions with ADS, we are directly appropriating general fund. So that's the $9.3 million here. So in prior years, they got a very small $200,000 or so direct general fund appropriation. So this year that will go up to $9 million. And again, we believe that's the right thing to do. I think that's the right way to do it. And some of these costs were not being, or some of these services were not being recovered in prior years, which was in part what was one of the reasons why there was a growing deficit in the CIT fund, because it was performing functions that were not truly lending themselves to cost recovery departments. I'm not saying they weren't necessary. I'm really saying that they weren't lending themselves to billing back to agencies and departments. If my department needs a specific kind of software because we're the budget office and we need this software, that's easy. I get it. They procure it for me and they bill me for it. That's easy. But there are other services that may or may not lend themselves to that direct billing arrangement. So that was in part why we think there was a deterioration in the fund balance in the CIT fund. So these services will henceforth be paid directly to the general fund to remove any inconsistency or any doubt about that. So that's changed.
So then do you
Yes.
do you expect to not have a negative fund balance? In
Um,
this case,
Our goal this year is to end up in in balance.
okay,
will still
which is
have-
always your goal.
We will still have an outstanding deficit that we
Okay.
will, talk to you guys about retiring in future years. But, our goal is to to end up in balance. I mean, that's always the goal for all internal service
Right.
funds.
Exactly.
By definition, they should end up with a zero balance. You know, sometimes they end up with a small surplus, sometimes small deficit, but you know, they should end up in balance.
So it's the 45 million, right? Is it 45?
The deficit is $25 million, but
Oh,
not 45.
I thought I 45.
The 45 will be where we are balanced.
Yeah, that's the size of the
Yes, will
core.
be balanced.
Yeah. That's the size of core enterprise services, $41 million, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at the deficit.
That's 25, it's not represented up there, but it's $25 million.
25.
You can find that in the annual comprehensive financial report, which I know that this committee reads regularly.
We will now.
No, so is there since this is all happening now, I would expect that you will have some sort of explanation in that document next year. Right? Is that, okay, so great,
You can look forward to that.
okay.
The final comment I'd make is that, and again, along the theme of trying to compartmentalize and make transparent, instead of setting the demand cost recovery components, that is the timesheet, the SLA and bespoke, into a larger pool and mixing the spending authority into one big pool, we're actually creating separate funds for each of those. So next year, or maybe we'll be able to track how much we spent on timesheet, although you'd have to remember the timesheet has become professional resourcing fund. So you'll be able to see that fund and how much went out and how much it started with, and you'll be able to see the balance. Similarly, the enterprise offerings fund, which is last year and prior years was SLA, you'll be able to see that fund. And finally, the bespoke is now customized services fund. The body of that fund has been reduced again as spending authority rests solely with agencies, departments. However, there is a $5 million proposed spending authority there. And that's substantially for hardware and, products that are like this laptop, for example, that are purchased by AES on behalf of agencies and departments. So that will still remain.
Okay, so that is also where we do what I was calling capital, but the big projects, the $30 million projects would be in the customized services fund, right? In the future.
Until this year, yes, but in the future, they will remain with the agencies and departments where they were before. It's just that spending authority will not be duplicated at AES in the customized. services
Okay,
fund.
so the entire project will be in the department. I'm sorry, I didn't,
Each department that has a project
well,
will have the spending authority for that project.
like, DMV, I mean, they just did a project.
Right.
So that project cost, if we were doing it this way, would be completely in DMV.
Correct.
All right, and that's appropriate, I would say, because that's where it should be, because then the revenue source that supports DMV should be the revenue source that supports their operations.
I would, if I can make a correction. So the DMV project is IT mod fund, totally different than this. Those are one-time appropriations that went into a specific IT modernization fund that JFO reports on regularly.
Okay,
The Medicaid data warehouse project is a better example. That is funded 90% through federal dollars, 10% through state dollars. That wouldn't reflect in our budget appropriation any longer. That would sit solely within AHS. So it would vary by project. If it's state funds, IT mod fund would likely be where that would be funded through. If it's federal dollars or non-general fund dollars paying for it, it would only be reflected in the agencies, individual agencies' budgets.
okay, so which category was DMV?
IT mod fund.
Is IT Mod Fund continuing? So that's one of your 8 funds?
No, it's not a budgeted fund. It is it's an IT project fund.
Okay,
It's also a special.
It's a special fund, yeah.
Special,
Yeah.
okay.
So not a budget, we don't budget for it.
It's one-time funding.
Correct.
So
Okay,
It
so
would
that's
be
what
like
I'm
a capital
thinking.
expense.
But those are
Thank you.
considerably expensive items. I mean, those aren't little, miscellaneous.
But
Those
that,
are-
it's a capital
It is a
expense.
No, I understand that. So I was calling it a capital expense, but they don't call it a capital expense. That's why we're having fun with this.
It
Okay.
is tracked independently, you can see it. It just doesn't live in our base appropriation.
Right,
Correct.
and it shouldn't.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. We're good.
Other questions? Speechless.
IT is exciting.
Yes. So I just wanted to point out because there was interest in the House when they asked me to come in, they said, well, let's make sure we know what's changing with customized services fund. And I know this has been covered before, but I wanted to be clear that this is a change. The spending authority is no longer with the Agency of Digital Services. But that's really the only change. The way we go about filling out projects, the way we go about devising projects and ADS advising out projects and sponsoring departments, paying for project, all of that is going to remain the same. There'll still be very strong ADS oversight. They will work with departments to come up with what they need. They will go out and they will interview vendors, they'll hire vendors, they'll keep track of the project as it's going along. The one change will be that the payment, when it comes time to pay, the payment will be made from the sponsoring agency. That's the only change. And we are, as I mentioned to the House Committee, we are working very diligently to make sure that that works. I'm not here to tell you that everything has been figured out and nailed it down, but we will make sure that you guys have the information you need when it's called for, or if you have questions, we'll get it to you. So if something, a report is due, it'll be on your desks. We'll make sure that happens. And we're going to spend the next months prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year figuring out this project process. And we've already started that, and as you know, that we're on, but it's going to require collaboration with not just the Agency of Digital Services, Finance and Management within the Agency of Administration, but all the departments. The departments that are hosting these projects. We're going to have to work with them too to make sure they're set up within, say, the device to be able to pay vendors. And contracts to make sure that that's copacetic. I mean, I don't want to downplay the fact that it's going to require work, but I do want to tell you that what you guys need, you will have.
Thank you.
We're intimately aware of that.
Thank you.
So,
And I'm glad you're pursuing this work just for the viability, not viability, but the understandableness, it's not the right word, but of our financial records. Just so that we and the public can understand what's going on. And I just want to highlight a couple of things in Lisa's memo. So the project management standards talks about the payment, because we talked a lot about the payment, but I just want to make sure that folks know, because it was important to me, that the department, there are at least four sign-offs on the payment. So the department, and we say business, I use department for, it just works better for me as a government person. But when when the IT people say business, it means department. Just so you know, so that would be like human resources or DMV, it's a distinct operation. And the project manager in this case is a person from ADS or a person that ADS has hired. So the ADS person, the department, and then the IT lead, which would be the more technical person, which I believe is in the department, but is funded by ADS. And sometimes the sponsors, and the sponsors are the folks with the funding, basically. And that happens in some major operations. So I just think it's important that we know that when we're talking about which department is going to be cutting the check, and I guess probably your department cuts the check, but what we're saying is we're transferring spending authority for the project, but both of the entities that we're talking about are going to be signing off on the payment, no matter
That's
which department it's in. So all of the relevant folks are part of this process, and they all need to agree that it's appropriate to make the payment. I think that's important. And I'm glad. And then I have a completely different question. But does anyone else want to talk about this change?
No, I think.
Okay, so the project management standards, the FMO that we talk about, which is that the evaluation of the projects essentially. And
The Enterprise Project Management Office.
yes, thank you. But it's that list that we've been talking about a little bit, because IT is new to this committee. And we've talked about the dashboard, and I asked about why this change isn't impacting the dashboard and which I do understand now. But I found out through that conversation that the dashboard does not include total expenditures. It includes other types of
Budget,
okay, so budget and then
the budgeted, the original budgeted when the project concept was being formulated. And then the budget that was in place when the implementation began. So they had all the actual contract amounts and that sort of thing to start, though they can change over time.
okay.
They have change orders.
So next time when we're talking about ETMO, I just want you to know that I'm going to advocate for it including total expenditures, because I think that's a number that needs to be in that list. It's relevant. So people don't need to comment unless they want to, but just heads up. And heads up to you too. I expect you would want that possibly, but
That's why we have chart fields, Madam Chair.
yeah. Okay, great. But I wouldn't want to, have something not relevant, but to me, total expenditures are pretty relevant. Okay. I think we're good. So we will adjourn.